If you watched last year's video on vampire folklore from around the world, you know that before there was Bram Stoker's Dracula, Anne Rice, The Vampire Diaries, Blade, I guess, there were many legends of vampiric creatures plaguing most cultures. Before Stoker put them in castles, real vampires were working people meeting with a cursed fate after death in their rural villages. What's now a sexy Robert Pattinson, Ian Somerhalder fantasy was once a living nightmare. Today, I will bring you the historical accounts of real vampires who once walked this earth, and maybe still do. Was that intro good? Was it spooky enough for you? Do I seem more on crack today? It's just because I slept good last night. Anyway, apparently only a few of you made an offering to Wendell after my last video. So we sacrificed my Labubu to the still unknown demon possessing him. So that's great, that's just part of my life now. The demon in Wendell is stronger. And really, I'm just not sure what to do about that. Let's talk about something less spooky than my demonic candy corn. Let's just talk about the real vampires. A very brief trigger warning for sexual assault for the Juar Grando part of this video. I didn't want to catch anybody off guard if they're just trying to have a good time. Juar Grando was a stonemason in the village of Kringa, Istria, Croatia. I am not looking up how to say literally anything in this video, so you really get to see me flounder with all the pronunciations. He was a very large man, which is most likely why he was known as Juar Grando when his actual surname was Alalovic, which I can totally understand because they do refer to me as clever, thick queen of darkness. Some legends refer to him as just like a regular villager, while others say that he was mean and greedy and just kind of like the village problem, which is another thing you can call me after I die. He had a wife named Ivana and 2 daughters, and according to some locals, his daughters hated him so much they ran away to Voltaire, Italy, to hang out with the sexy vampires. 1656, Juar died of illness, which you think would like make things better as he seemingly made things harder, but this is my channel, so things got a lot worse. After his death, the village began to receive knocks on their door every night. And after every house that received a knock, one person from that household would die. The village wasn't sure at first what was going on, but unfortunately, his widow did. Every night, his fat, nasty corpse, described as smiling and gasping for air, would visit his widow and force himself on her. Juar went on to terrorize the village, knocking on doors and sexually assaulting his former wife every night for 16 years. That's like this many days. But after 16 years, everybody got pretty sick of his shit. Now, accounts vary on this part, some saying it was Father Giorgio, this is how it's spelled, while other accounts I read said the village sent for a Krisnik. Krisnik is kind of like a shaman. It's somebody with supernatural abilities that is passed down from generation to generation. For the sake of the story, I'm gonna stick with Father Giorgio, and everything I saw mostly referred to Father Giorgio. One night, Father Giorgio decided to confront Juar with a cross and told him to leave. Juar reportedly started crying and ran away in fear. That's right, first real vampire, first little bitch. Giorgio saw this as an opportunity and gathered 9 men from the village for a little vampire hunt. The first night, they chased him down and tried to pierce his heart with a hawthorn branch, but it wouldn't go through. So they had to regroup. So a few nights later, they dug up his corpse before it could rise and found it had red cheeks and a perfectly preserved creepy smile. Giorgio lifted the crucifix and said some Jesus-y shit, and they tried again to pierce his heart with the hawthorn branch and found that it still didn't work. God did not come through on this occasion. If at first you don't succeed, grab an axe. As soon as he began to cut off Juar's head, he reportedly opened his eyes and started screaming. Blood flowed from the wound and began to fill the entire grave. The excessive blood, of course, believed to have been the blood from all of his victims. And that was it for Juar Grando. Finally, there would be peace in the village again. Ooh, we're testing my pronunciation with this one. Peter Blažević. I'm gonna go with Blažević. If it's something else, don't tell me. We're just gonna call him Peter. Peter lived in the village of Kislova. At the time, this was a part of Serbia, which was controlled by Austria. Peter died in 1725. And I bet you can't guess what happened next. Over the next 8 days, 9 villagers died, all becoming very weak and pale, as if they had significant blood loss. On their deathbeds, each of them said they had been visited by Peter and he had come in at night and choked them where they lay in bed. But that's not all. Peter returned home one night and asked his son for some food. His son refused because Peter's supposed to be dead, because that's his dead corpse dad asking for food. In retaliation, Peter beat his son to death and drank his blood. The residents of the village were so panicked they decided they must exhume Peter's body and look for signs of vampirism. Now, personally, I think we have plenty of signs of vampirism already in this story. It was a different time. They insisted on both the local priest and the Austrian administration official and imperial provisor, Ernest Formblad, be in attendance. Formblad insisted they get permission from the Austrian authorities to exhume the body. The villagers literally said, "We have to exhume this body as soon as possible, or we're gonna abandon the village," which gave Formblad no choice but to accept. Politics. It used to kind of help people, maybe. When they opened the casket, they found a perfectly preserved body, a beard that had continued to grow, and that Peter's mouth was smeared with fresh blood. They drove a stake through his heart, and much like Juan Grando, the wound began to bleed so much that it filled the grave. After this, they then burned his body and scattered his ashes to ensure he couldn't come back. And again, like Juan Grando, the story began to spread through Europe, just adding to the increasing anxiety around vampires. In 1731, mass vampirism began to be a huge problem. The one time I'm gonna say it, this is the story of Arnold Payol. That's it. That's the only time I'm gonna say it. He's just Arnold from now on. Arnold moved to the village from the Turkish-controlled part of Serbia. Okay, so we have the Austrian-controlled part of Serbia and the Turkish-controlled part of Serbia. Now, after moving to town, Arnold often bragged about being bitten by a vampire, but curing himself by eating the dirt from the vampire's grave. Personally, I've never bragged about eating dirt, but I am single, so maybe I should put that in my back pocket. Now, what Arnold couldn't have predicted is that a year later, he accidentally broke his neck and died. But this is a vampire video, so that's not the end of his story, because he started terrorizing the village. In 20 days, 4 villagers died after complaining that Arnold had come to visit them in the night and tormented them. When they exhumed his body, they found fresh blood leaking from all of his orifices. And the fabric they had wrapped him in before they laid him to rest was torn open. And when they staked him, more fresh red blood poured out from his wounds. They then beheaded him and burned his body. Now, that was the same story twice, right? Peter and Arnold, very similar situations. And honestly, if it wasn't for what comes next, I probably wouldn't have even mentioned Arnold. In the same village, 5 years later, it started happening again. And in just 3 months, 17 people had died. They would seem totally fine just 2 or 3 days before. Then they'd go gaunt, they'd become fatigued, and start complaining of stabs in their side, chest pain, and a fever. And the locals had already decided exactly who they were gonna blame: Malika and Stana. Malika had just moved to the village 6 years before from the Ottoman-controlled lands and was well liked by the village. However, there was just like one little itty-bitty baby red flag. Offhandedly, she had mentioned that before she had eaten a sheep killed by vampires. And not just any vampires, Arnold and his victims. And Stana, who had also moved from the Ottoman lands, fucked up and said that once she had covered herself in vampire blood to protect herself from the vampires. So while in the Ottoman-controlled lands that kept you safe, Here around these parts, that meant you're gonna be a vampire. And it was not the flex that she thought it was. This is the bad luck of when folklore combines. These two vampire flexes were all fun and games until the girls died. And just a reminder, in the 3 months since they had died, 17 people have died of basically vampire illness. Exactly as in the previous time, they said we must exhume these vampires and we must execute them. Turkish military said no. They said, sick, we're just gonna abandon the village then. So the Turkish military said no, no, no. While the most recent 3 victims were gross, smelly, falling apart corpses, as they should be, the other 12, including Malika and Stana, were swollen with fresh blood, and what's our favorite phrase about these vampires? Perfectly preserved. This was an unprecedented amount of vampires, so they brought in a military surgeon to come witness what was happening. Surgeon cut into their bodies. They found that all of their insides and organs and whatnot was filled with fresh blood and not, dark, gross, coagulated blood like it should be. One of the villagers said that Malika looked especially plump and healthy because when they knew her when she was alive, they described her as lean and dried up. Despite apparently being well-liked by the village, they described her as skinny and dehydrated. He really dragged her like that, like on an official report. In the final report, the bodies were described as in vampiric condition, and thus their heads were removed and burned along with their bodies. And the 3 gross, rotting bodies were laid to rest. Hello, it is handheld editing clever haunts coming to you from my bed. When I recorded this video, I was on a little bit of a time constraint, and I thought when I got back from my doctor's appointment, I would be able to finish it. But I couldn't. So I decided to split it up into 2 parts and just record the second part separately and post it separately. You are not going to miss out on any videos because I put this in 2 parts. All that's getting bumped is a Spirit of Halloween haul, which I didn't even spend that much money at Spirit this year and wasn't really into most of the things there. So you're not really missing anything there. So I will see you next week for Real Vampires Part 2. Like, subscribe, comment, all of the things. You know the deal. This isn't your first time on YouTube. God, I need a script. I ramble so much without a script. I'm Clever Haunts, and I guess that's it.